what he did in his computing machinery and intelligence paper was exactly, he explicitly started with the question, can machines think?
Yeah.
And then he said, sorry, I think that question is too meaningless. But here's a different question. Could you program a computer so that you couldn't tell the difference between it and a human? Right. And,
So in the very first few sentences, he in fact just
Yep.
formulates the Q prime question.
He does precisely that. Or, we could look at Gödel, right? Where, you had these philosophers arguing for centuries about the limits of mathematical reasoning, right? And the limits of formal systems. And, then by the early 20th century, logicians, starting with, Frege, Russell, and then, most spectacularly Gödel, managed to reframe those questions as, look, we have these formal systems, they have these definite rules. Are there questions that we can phrase within the rules of these systems that are not provable within the rules of the systems? And can we prove that fact? Right. And so that would be another example. I had this essay called "The Ghost in the Quantum Turing Machine." That's one of the crazier things I've written. But I tried to do something, or to advocate doing something similar there for free will, where instead of talking about is free will real, or we get hung up on the meaning of what exactly do we mean by freedom, and can you be or do we mean compatibilist free will, libertarian free will? What do these things mean? I suggested just asking the question, how well, in principle, consistently with the laws of physics, could a person's behavior be predicted? Without, so let's say, destroying the person's brain, taking it apart in the process of trying to predict them. And, and that actually, asking that question gets you into all sorts of meaty and interesting issues, issues of what is the computational substrate of the brain, or can you understand the brain, just at the sort of level of the neurons, at sort of the abstraction of a neural network, or do you need to go deeper to the, molecular level and ultimately even to the quantum level, right? And of course, that would put limits on predictability.